Hey, welcome back. Hey man, welcome back. Don't know if you can hear me or not. Or girl, I don't know. Are you a boy or a girl? I don't want to be, I don't want to insult you. Alright, fair. Can you hear me okay? So, I mean, the thing is, you want me to explain quite a lot, and I can't really be asked typing. So, I just thought it'd be easier to have a discussion about it. But yeah, welcome. Carry on. Clarify your position. Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, okay. Okay, so Mayim Bialik, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. That section was obviously used to show the political side of veganism. Um, she's obviously a lot less. What's the word I'm looking for? Like she's nowhere near as like abrasive as someone like Ask Yourself, you know. So she was a good representation to show that there are well-meaning vegans who come at it in a real nicey way, as opposed to someone like Ask Yourself, who is a lot more kind of authoritarian about it. Is that fair? I mean, it comes across as if like, you know, everyone should definitely be vegan right now, and if you're not vegan right now, you better be able to defend yourself. Whereas Mayim Bialik was more kind of saying, you know, I can appreciate that most people are uneducated, and maybe that's the reason there aren't more vegans. Um, you know, she basically she was asking people to educate themselves a bit more, to look into it in a real nicey way, you know. So I felt like those two people were a good contrast in that respect. And also, the video is obviously introducing characters that will play a part in later videos in the series. So it was good to get different people that fall into different areas in the umbrella of veganism. So obviously, Ask Yourself is more based on the philosophy of veganism. Obviously, Mayim Bialik's reference was more to do with the politics, and then Vegan Gains, who's later in the video, I don't know if you saw that bit, he concentrates more on the dietary needs. Now, I'm not suggesting that these characters only believe the arguments that are shown in the video at all. I'm just portraying them to show how vegans will direct you towards different areas, those being the three main ones in the umbrella. I don't know if all that came across, so if I broke up a bit, you know, or you need clarification, or I said something stupid, please let me know. I'll shut up for a minute. Cool. So, yeah, go on. Carry on. Please do. Ask me anything you like. That's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's easier for me to, you know, say these things rather than trying to sit there and type it all down, and then, you know, we end up having a paragraph each and we're going back and forth. Like, you've already started having to quote me. We've already started writing massive paragraphs, you know, so I felt like it would be an easier platform to be able to communicate. And to be honest, it's working for me because I can read what you're writing. So as long as it's working for you as well, I'm fine. Right. I appreciate that. I appreciate where you're coming from, because I said that vegan that Ask Yourself has a more authoritarian approach, and what you're suggesting is that that's that it's an unfair representation for me to make, but I don't really think it is, because obviously that's exactly what authoritarian people do. Does that make sense? Like, looking at it in the absolute most basic form of the word, an authority figure, you know, so we're talking about like politics makes law, right? And it is against the law for human exploitation. So obviously an authoritarian figure is literally against human exploitation and human murder. Like, I'm trying to say that they're two distinctly different categories. You could have an authoritarian person who was advocating for murder. You could have an authoritarian person who was advocating against murder. Um, does that make is that a fair statement to make? Because I appreciate where you're coming from. I was just trying to maybe I used the word wrong initially, but I'm just trying to show the difference between the approaches of different vegans. You understand that the video essentially is about the ideology of veganism, correct? Like, it's not about refuting anybody's specific points or anything like that. Essentially, I know I couldn't really help myself at some points, but the essential argument is showing their ideologies and trying to explain where that differs from my own, just as a basic introduction to the series. So yeah, that's fine, that's fair. I mean, it's a long video. This is the only main contention that I've really got. I totally appreciate the criticism. I understand that there's going to be people who aren't going to like it just straight off the bat because of the title. There are people who have been sent to me by Ask Yourself who has already portrayed me in a bad light, and so I totally get that. But the one thing that does get to me a little bit, and it's only a little bit, I can handle it. Um, But the one thing that does get to me a little bit is the dislikes, because I mean, we're talking, it took me 18 hours just to put that video together. That's not including the research that went into it. That's not including the upload time, none of that. 18 hours just purely on the editing, and that amount of dislikes. The dislike doesn't even mean anything to you people. Like, from your perspective, it's whether you like or dislike a video. That's not really what it is. It's a rating system. It's basically saying, do you want other people to be able to see this video? And so, that hits me quite hard when I get a massive amount of dislikes from people who haven't even watched the video. And I don't mind the back and forth. I love the conversation that we get from it. It's just those dislikes, because there's no need for it really. Who goes around disliking other people's videos? It's meant to be there to stop trolls and stuff, making titles that don't really reflect the video and that kind of thing. It's overused in my opinion. I guess, like, it's fine if somebody dislikes the video and they also comment to explain why they've disliked it. I'm not quite so bothered about that. When there's a dislike without a comment, it's neither use nor ornament. It's not going to help anyone. So how can I improve when people are just pressing the dislike button, and especially when they haven't watched it? But anyway, yeah, like I say, I appreciate that it's a long video and it's hard to get through. Okay, well, that's fine, but we haven't even got to that stage of the video yet. Like, I can't remember how many points are on the list. Let me just quickly check. But that was literally part 1, point 1. And if even in the intro, I just said that all I'm going to be doing is introducing some characters and highlighting some of the areas that veganism splits in order to show the distinction. Now, again, you're right, it's frustration on both people's sides. You see the word cult associated with the word vegan and you automatically want to dislike it without listening to what's said. I can appreciate that. That makes sense. But it's not fair. And I truly do believe that veganism is a cult. And as I'm making this series, I'm exploring that idea. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think 9, 10 on the next page. So there are about 10 different points on the list. Not all of which have been checked off. I think veganism appears, in my perspective, to cover about 6 or 7 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh no, actually, I've got like maybe 10 10 boxes checked, so there must be more than that. I just can't be bothered going through my screenshots, counting correctly at the minute. Can you define in what way you define veganism as a cult in your context? Again, we're gonna be going through the list in the series, but there's a lot to it. Basically, I've done a little bit of sociology and psychology. One of my favorite parts was the difference between like groups. So I want to call them cult-like groups, because I've forgotten the term. But there's two different types of groups. One is more like society, in which every member of society has their own goals, their own ideals, and we all work together. But because nobody knows what anybody else is striving for, what's right and wrong in another person's life, we can't praise or punish each other very harshly, and you can always take other people's praise or punishment with a grain of salt. Whereas in more of a cult-like mentality, where all the members of the cult have the same drive, the same focus, everybody knows what the ideal is for everybody else, and therefore when somebody does something good, it's much easier to praise them. The praise is tenfold, and when there's punishment, again the punishment is tenfold. And if you a member of any vegan groups, a lot of vegans and ex-vegans can attest to the fact that, you know, if somebody slips, if somebody says they're having a rough day, as well as getting a lot of support from some people, I'm not suggesting that doesn't exist, they also get a lot of hate, a lot of people who will just immediately bully them. I mean, look at my video, just look at the statistics on my video, compare that with any of my other videos. Usually I get 30 views, but because of Ask Yourself sending a link out to his followers, I've got over 200 views, and I've got what, over 20 dislikes. And I can guarantee you in 2 days when them stats come through, 90% of the people that have watched the video will not have watched more than a second of it. They'll have clicked on the video, clicked the dislike button, maybe left a comment, probably not, and then left. You know? So there are many miniature little behaviors that we can go into now, but that's why I'm doing a series about it, is to identify, I'm not saying every single vegan, but then, is Christianity a cult? You know, like, can you see where I'm coming from? There are a lot of similarities between things that we would know to be cultish and the way that some certain vegans act. I wouldn't say it's just vegans either, to be fair. I think there are some meat eaters like myself who've been pushed to the edge and are now kind of cultish about defending our right to eat meat. I mean, maybe I'm going too far. Why do I care enough to make videos about it? It's because it's been pushed down my throat so many times by people who don't understand my personal circumstances. And they don't, you know, they've never given me a reasonable justification for why I should go vegan. So I've got to this point now where maybe I am myself displaying some of these behaviors because I'm so ingrained in it, because, like, you know, it's been years of vegans trying to change me, persuade me, whatever, you know, just have a go at me, basically make me feel guilty about the way I live my life. False. Let me save you some time. You're not going to convince me. You're not going to turn me vegan, right? Now, I don't want to disrespect you, but I've got a feeling that in your head, you've got the same opinion that many vegans have, which is that I only eat meat for taste pleasure. So let me cut you off before you make that statement, because that's absolutely so far from the truth. But yeah, you're welcome to ask anything you want or discuss anything that you like. I'm happy with that. But you're not gonna, let me tell you straight off the bat, I'm not here to change your opinion. I've got a great deal of respect, not only for the fact that you can be a vegan, but your reasons behind it. I totally, you know, empathize with your cause. You're not going to change my opinion. Okay, you're not going to change the way that I live my life. It's just not going to happen. So, you know, if you'd like to try to understand more how meat eaters feel about something, you're going to get a lot of value out of this conversation. If you're only here to try to change my mind, that's not going to happen. So, yeah, a lot of cult members try to persuade people into their cult. That's not just a vegan thing. Christians do it. Scientologists do it. If you'd like to set up some kind of debate where, you know, we can publicly discuss our ideas, and you can use me as a platform, you know, in order to spread your own ideas, something to bounce off, if you like, then you've got a good chance of maybe converting other people in the audience that are listening, but you're not going to be able to change me. I think the reason people struggle with that concept is because they ask the wrong questions, they expect the wrong things. Again, what I mean, there's a lot more classed than that, isn't there? Like, you can advocate for the rights of animals. I'm happy for you to do that. I'm not stopping you from doing that. In fact, I'll stand by your side. This is another issue that I have with vegans, is that it's all or nothing, right? We're both against torture. We're both against cruel practices. We're both against factory farms. So why can we not stand side by side as brothers and try to change these things? Why does it have to be all or nothing? Why can't I stand for animal rights while simultaneously eating meat? Because I can see a lot of value in, you know, local grown meat, which is what I eat. Just in case you're wondering, I live in a place called Lincolnshire. Not sure where in the world you're from, but it's in England, and literally 5 minutes from my doorstep, there are cows that are grown for the meat, and then there's a supermarket literally 2 minutes away from that which sells the meat. They have to go on a journey between the two. You know, they come back, and then I buy them, so I get to see a lot of the process. Oh right, it's Pyro, of course. Yeah, a lot of people think that Pyro is a troll, and I understand he can be quite abrasive. So please appreciate that. On my side of the fence, there's a lot of meat eaters that would just absolutely outright refuse to even talk about this subject or go near it. So it's hard to find, you know, voices that are supporting. So if you find his behaviour trolling, I do apologise. I'm not necessarily going to call him out on it very often, basically because it's hard to find anyone on my side at all. Obviously, if he gets a bit rowdy, I'll call him out. But generally, I don't have a problem with his behaviour, because I don't really have a problem with most people's behaviour. To be fair, I put up with a lot. I think you're oversimplifying the question. I'm not suggesting that vegans advocating, like specifically advocating for animal rights, is considered cult behaviour. That is one of the behaviours of veganism, which has other behaviours that are cult-like. Does that make sense? The way that I brought the question together was by saying that I would happily stand by your side. If you were only advocating for animal rights, we could stand side by side, for example, and make a big deal about the dog meat industry or factory farming. Any of these things I'm happy to stand by the side of all vegans with, but they won't let me. Vegans will not stand by the side of anyone other than another vegan, and that is cult-like. I don't really understand your statement. Sorry, I've read it a couple of times. There are many vegan behaviours and many rights activist behaviours. You don't really have to have the word human rights in there, do you? You can have animal rights, you can have human rights, you can have the rights of anything. Can we just go through the statement that you made, though? So you're considering the killing of the animals to be needless. and obviously it's not. So when you're saying needlessly, you're trying to insist that, I mean, that would make it murder, wouldn't it? If it was a needless killing, it would be murder. It's not needless. The animals wouldn't even be born if they weren't going to be killed. So the killing of it is needless. Using the word stabbing, you know for a fact, hopefully after talking to me for a couple of minutes, you understand that I'm a firm advocate for a painless death. So obviously stabbing is pretty much entirely out of the question, unless somebody could show me that stabbing was the most painless way of doing it, in which case, yeah, I would stand by stabbing. But obviously you've used that word just to incite like an us versus them style think. You want me to come across as evil as possible by using the words needlessly and stabbing, when you know that both of those are absolutely erroneous. Do you think that's fair? Because that's how it comes across. So I hope that's a fair summary. Okay, right. I do hear this statement quite a lot. I don't want you to type too far ahead until I've addressed it. Okay. I mean, you've made a point there, so it's easier for me to address you point by point. I can wait if you want. Okay. Since you're not typing, I'll just continue my thought. Look, all sentient beings suffer. Okay, there's no way of stopping suffering outright. Is that a fair statement to make? Humans suffer, wild animals suffer. We're not causing them any more suffering than they would have in their own life until you talk about abuse. But we can't stop. There are some horrible humans in the world, and I'm not one of them, and they're not as widespread as you might think. There are people who want to abuse children who will go seek out jobs working in schools. There are people who want to abuse animals that will go seek out jobs working with animals so that they can bully, so that they can inflict pain on other things because that's what they like to do. That's not all of us, and it's not as common as you think. Like I say, I live literally 5 minutes away from a farm where I can go watch the cows growing up, and they are healthy, they are totally not abused. I've seen them at all times of year. I see where they go in winter. I see how the farmers act with them, you know, and so I know for a fact that their animals are much, much less stressful than they would be in any other conditions. And I appreciate that the way that they die is not necessarily the best way possible if we were able to spend a hell of a lot of money on it. But do you understand how we kill humans? Because this is something that I've never heard vegans even admit to. No, we're not. You see, this is a different point entirely. The society that we have right now has literally grown up around the meat industry, around livestock farming, around farming in general. In the same way that the society that we have now has grown up around petrol. We all know how bad petrol is for the environment, but it would literally be impossible for us to stop everything and just change to solar power or water power or whatever else. It cannot be done overnight. It's a slow change over time, and the same thing has to be done with the meat industry. Slowly over time it will fade out, the same as religion has faded out, the same as anything else. Meat eating will fade out over time. We all know this. We can see the rise in veganism, but it's not just an overnight quick fix. It's not going to happen like that, and we're not doing it because we've been conditioned by society so much as, I mean, obviously I can see where you're coming from, that's a part of it, but the reason that it is so prevalent, so there are so many factory farms and stuff, is because of the economic drive, because society has been built around this industry. It's cemented in the heart of it. You see what I mean? So it's not a fair statement to make to say that it's simply due to conditioning. Like, there's a hell of a lot more to it. It goes back. I'm getting comments on YouTube again. So yeah, to finish my thought, my granddad survived for years and years and years, and he had a few strokes, and He ended up in a care home where he was unable to move his body. So he was definitely, you know, right at the end of his life. He couldn't eat by himself, he couldn't drink by himself, anything like that. And the way that they killed him when the home decided, you know, he's past it now, it's time that we let him go, was they stopped giving him water. They just left him in bed. He was unable to get out of bed, obviously, because he was too weak, and they just left him there to die of thirst. Okay? Now that's how we kill a human. You tell me that you wouldn't prefer to have a bolt gun to the head, just a quick. Yes, it is a very horrible way to die, and that's legitimately how we kill humans. Okay? So you tell me now that you would prefer that over a bolt gun to the head. Now, to make it even better for the cow, a cow has no concept of what a bolt gun is. It doesn't know where it is, and so it can smell blood, maybe. It can get a feeling of fear, but it has literally no idea about the concept of death. You know, not until it happens. So my analogy to this would be an alien race. Aliens abducted you, and they kept you in like a zoo, so you've got a bit of freedom to move about, maybe, you know, you can do regular things, you can exercise, whatever. And then one day these aliens, you can't understand the language, you've no idea what they're thinking. One day, they've always been nice to you the whole lives, and they take you to a room, you know, you may be 30 years oldish, they take you to a room that you've never been to before, and it smells a bit weird, and you feel a bit edgy, and then all of a sudden you're dead. You'd never see it coming, you'd never understand that that's why you were there. What is the harm? Where is the problem? Because that whole time, those whole 30 years that you've been alive, those aliens have fed you, they've kept you warm, they've kept you safe. If you've had any medical conditions, those have been paid for. Now, the issue here is that what I'm referring to, of course, is not a factory farm. It's more along the lines of what you might call a cow-calf operation. And these things cost money. And the only way that we can fund them, the only real way to fund them, is by buying their meat, buying their products. And when you don't do that, these places are forced to close. And the only option that there is factory farms, because it's a much cheaper option.